start now?
Gigi, please.
Okay. So, okay, fine. So it's Hamid Saeed here from MS Development Studies, batch 19, and the
Hamid,
potential
can you
of
also start
yes.
presenting your slide?
Okay, so can Miss Amna Anwar can do it on my behalf, or I guess I can do it myself.
If you're having connectivity issues, then I can do it, but it's advisable that you do your slide.
Okay, so let me just do it. Is it visible?
G, please go full screen.
Sure. Okay, so is it visible now?
G, bilkul, please.
Okay, fine. So, Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's Hamid Saeed here from MS Development Studies batch 19, and the potential topic of my research is states' entrepreneurial role. An analysis of states' entrepreneurial role for development of entrepreneurship in Pakistan, 2010 onwards. So, introduction is that Pakistan, being a progressing country of South Asia, is trying to take different paths, including entrepreneurship, to improve living standards of its people and to increase GDP as well. Right. So the background is that Pakistan faced a very low stability of democracy, resulting in no or less consistent policies and states' active role in development sector. So nation also had to fight major wars with neighboring countries that shifted the focus of state towards survival mode, rather working passionately towards development, growth, and especially sustainability. So most of our policies were focused about the survival mode of that very time, but not towards the sustainability thing. So my area of research is that we are focused about studying the state's role in development of entrepreneurship in 10-year time span from 2010 to 2020. The selection of this time span is because of political stability, international economic and political stability and peace, increased influence and number of youth and skilled labor. Another reason is fourth industrial revolution within this time span, technological advancements and adoption, and a lot of other factors that motivates us to focus this study to past 10 years only. So my research question here is that does states policies and active participation led to development of entrepreneurship ecosystem in Pakistan? So here I develop a hypothesis that states' active role is crucial for entrepreneurship development in Pakistan, and it is more effective than other means. Right. So why states support SMEs and entrepreneurship? So reason to support SMEs is that they create more employment opportunities, contributing over 30% of GDP, and wealth circulation get broader. That is good for economy. So the methodology I'll be using in this research, my focus is on developing countries like Pakistan, and here I'm using publicly available data from Pakistan's ICT sector. And the sector involves Ministry of Information Technology and Telecommunication, organizations like National Incubation Centers, Ignite National Technology Fund, Pakistan Software Export Board, Pakistan All Software House Association, public and private incubators and accelerators, educational institutes, ICT firms, and concerned government departments. So for data gathering, this study will have a descriptive study design, making use of structured questionnaire-based interviews, as well as secondary data collected through reports and websites of concerned departments to meet the data requirements, as I just mentioned in the last slide. So for the statistical analysis, I'll be using a modified version of entrepreneurial index formula that was used by Mr. Zaim in his thesis at Information Technology University in 2018, where he studied Plan 9 incubator and developed an entrepreneurial index called EPI. So I'll be modifying that index a little bit and adding a few more controls to check this index. And the horizon is now broadened. It's not only checking the entrepreneurial index of Plan 9 only, but it's making a comparison of public and private sector investments to foster the entrepreneurial ecosystem within Pakistan. So here is a snapshot of the variables that Mr. Zaim in his study used, And here are a few new controls like number of people impacted, number of people employed, international awards or coverage count, revenue generated, market evaluation, social responsibility, and is the business registered or not? Because there are so many startup businesses that are not yet registered. So I'll be using that variable as a dummy one. So timeline is pretty simple, that it will be divided in 5 phases, where the selection of research domain, then literature review, methodology, data gathering, and getting response and organizing that, and then finally formatting and the related things. So here are a few qualifications that the international and national level initiatives from organizations other than government, that what we call NGOs, is not included in this study. There are so many initiatives taken by USAID, UKAID, and UNDP, etc. Those initiatives are not part of this study. We are primarily focused between the comparison of public and private sector investment only. So the private sector investments of Pakistani firms and the public investment of Pakistani government. And this study also does not focus on any one dimension or field of study like medical sciences or business studies or engineering, but it just give a broader snapshot of public and private sector investments in entrepreneurship. Also, this study does not talk about the role of media that is actually state-owned, and it's just focused about the investment and impact generated through the incubators and things that are physically impacting that ecosystem. So media primarily is not part of all this study. So like state-owned media like PTV and Radio Pakistan and all that, they are also playing a role to promote entrepreneurship and foster that culture. But this study is primarily more focused on that. So here is a brief about what I'm going to do with permission of my worthy faculty. So that's all from my side for now.
May I ask a few questions?
Please, please.
So, Hamid, it's a very interesting project. I just have a few questions about your methodology. I mean, not so much the methodology, but like really, yeah, I mean, what you're using, the methodology you're using versus the research question.
Right.
So the research question, if I'm not mistaken, is about the relationship between state policy, right, and entrepreneurial development.
Yes.
But why is it that? So what is the statistical analysis looking at? I mean, it is nothing in that statistical model about like state policy. If I'm not mistaken, there is no variable or proxy that is being used for that, right?
Okay, so there was a distortion in your voice. I could hear a little bit, and what I understand was that the variable is not talking about what was there in the search question. So I guess I
Right.
heard that right.
Yeah, because
So,
I mean, with respect particularly to the state, I mean,
right,
or the state's role or policy or whatever, I'm
right.
not see that in the model.
Right. So, sir, basically, I'll be calculating the EPI, Entrepreneurial Development Index, and then I'll be doing a comparison of entrepreneurial index of state-owned initiatives and the initiatives taken by private sector. And then I'll be comparing both of them, and I'll be trying to prove that the state-owned initiatives played a vital role for fostering entrepreneurship in Pakistan. So I want to prove a positive relationship between all these things and the role of state. So this is
Okay. Okay. Um, right. I'll come back to a few other questions if someone else has any other.
sure. Sir. Thank you very much.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, sir. Sure.
So आप कुछ बता सकेंगे कि आप कौन से नेशनल और प्राइवेट सेक्टर इनिशिएटिव्स के बारे में बात करें?
Yes, sir, sure. In national level, in incubators, we have NICs across Pakistan. That is initiative of Ignite, National Technology Fund. So we have NIC in Lahore, Peshawar, Quetta, Karachi, and all the other capital cities. So they are working since 2012, and there is a one NIC in Lums, Lahore, that is working even before that from 2010. So NICs are primarily representing the state-run initiatives, and Plan 9, Plan X, and other incubators who are sort of semi-government initiatives are also part of that. So these are on the state side. And in the private sector side, we have ID92, we have the league that is associated with the University of Central Punjab, and almost every university, public and private university, is having an incubator center associated with that. Because now it's a part of HEC policy that they ask a university to develop a business development center at least, or an entrepreneurial development sector. So all the private sector universities that are having an incubator or
Okay.
accelerator associated with that are part of that.
Okay, thank you. So, basically, so far what I have been able to understand from your presentation is that you want to show that basically the state matters uh, in developing entrepreneurial infrastructure, in developing entrepreneurs in a society.
Right.
So what? I mean, ये तो हमें पहले से पता है कि रियासत बड़ा इम्पोर्टेंट रोल प्ले करती है डेवलपमेंट एंटरप्रेन्योर्स के हवाले से नहीं पता, लेकिन हमें और बहुत सारी चीज़ों के हवाले से पता चल गया. I mean, the hypothesis is just too straightforward and too obvious. You will either fail to reject it or you will reject it. I mean, if you fail to reject it, then what is so insightful about this? हमारा लेसन क्या होगा? हमें पता चल गया स्टेट मैटर करती है, तो वो तो हमें वैसे ही पता है कि स्टेट मैटर करती है हर चीज में. I can't hear you. आपका माइक्रोफोन ऑफ है.
Okay, can you hear me now?
जी.
Okay, fine. So, okay, fine. Just give me a second. Okay, so the current debate and discussion that is going on around is that state is first of all not playing any impactful role in development of entrepreneurial index and all that. And the second argument is that the investments that state is making are not impactful. So there are two arguments out there in entrepreneurial ecosystem. I, being an entrepreneur myself and doing this since last almost 7 to 8 years, I have heard a lot of this, that first of all, state is not doing what it should do, and secondly, if it is doing, so the impact is not there. So my argument here is to statistically prove that first of all, state is doing all that. There is nothing like that state is not doing that. And the second thing is, what state is doing is more impactful than what private sector is doing. We often talk about that VC culture is not here, and all those things are not there. But the point is, even if VC culture is there, and even if private sector invest a lot in this sector, the impact of public sector investment and the state investment is way more than the private investment. So it's sort of obvious, you can say.
नहीं, वो ठीक है हामिद, आप ठीक कह रहे हैं कि ये इसमें डिबेट होगी. एक तो ये कि अभी आपकी प्रेजेंटेशन में हमें नहीं पता चला कि there are two different. Can you turn off the mic from your end?
Sure, let me do that. Okay, so let me do that.
जी. So ये नहीं मैं कह रहा कि ये आर्ग्यूमेंट नहीं है, तो आपकी प्रेजेंटेशन से ये नहीं पता चला कि देयर आर मल्टीपल आर्ग्यूमेंट्स अबाउट दिस. हाँ, सो सम रेफरेंस टू इट वुड बी नाइस. बट ये सिर्फ कह देना कि रियासत कुछ कर रही है जो कि इम्पोर्टेंट है is just too broad a hypothesis. It's either neither here nor there, because eventually you will be able to show something that the riyasat is doing, that the state is doing, which is benefiting the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So what I'm actually trying to get at is to make your hypothesis a bit more precise, right? So what do you mean that the state needs to do X, Y, Z? What are those X, Y, Z? Is it bringing outside investors to Pakistan that state has does a better job of than private sector, or is it? So you need to get something. You give us something really specific. हाँ, ये तो कोई बात ना हुई ना कि हमें रियासत जो है वो एक अच्छा रोल अदा करिए. You will eventually be able to show that or not show that, which is neither here nor there.
All right. So now the controls I'm using here that I want to check that if startups that are state funded are generating more revenues and they are having more market valuation and they are getting registered in a larger number. So that's what I just want to prove through this study that the state funded startups and entrepreneurial activities, they might not be startups, they are doing good in these particular areas, that they are impacting more people, they are having more number of people employed, they are having more international recognition, generating revenues, having greater market valuation, and all that. So actually these are the things I want to prove my point on.
May I add to Karthikeyan's journey?
I couldn't hear you. Can you kindly repeat?
Please turn your mic off so that I can ask. Yeah. Acha, I think we're just continuing for what Dr. Fahad is saying. I think literature jo hai na, state wala, it's too broad, and simply showing this won't be enough. It's, in fact, I mean, if you start with this, तो सबसे important question ये आ जाता है कि what is it that they're doing? What is the state doing? Let's just say that's a more precise question, right? Because by definition, or at least we could assume that there are certain forms of state interventions which are not conducive to entrepreneurial, developing entrepreneurial ecosystems, right? And certain kinds which might be. So the state on its own is too broad, a variable to simply say, okay, it's for or against something. So for example, we recently a thesis that I was supervising, usme thoda precise tha question. Role of, let's say, public investment on XYZ, right? It becomes a bit more precise. So either you so you can begin with this. In fact, it could be interesting if you already know, because it also seems, by the way, from what you're saying, is that you know the results. कि ये कर रही है state. So let's say कि you know कि ये particular incubators they've done well, right? Now this could be a puzzle from one perspective जो कहता है कि state important नहीं है, या it's anti-entrepreneurial, right? It could be a critique of that. So, yeah, but you begin with that by showing that actually, no, what was it that they were doing in this particular case that made it conducive for developing entrepreneurship? You know what I mean? Which means that, you do actual kind of research, जिसमें आप questions पूछते हो, you ask participants उसके अंदर कि वो उन्होंने ऐसा क्या किया, and so you can basically contribute to this literature by both critiquing those people who say कि state कुछ नहीं करती, that's good for entrepreneurship, but also critiquing those जो कहते हैं कि बस on its own simply state intervention will lead to better kind of entrepreneurial outcomes. You know what I mean? So having a more precise question, what is it that they're doing in this particular case, that would be a better focus rather than this simple impact, good impact or bad impact. I hope that helps.
Yes, I got your point. And I would just like to add one thing, that the impact that a entrepreneurial venture create, it's not just fixed to a single variable. Sometimes an entrepreneurial venture do very good in revenues, but other times it just focused on impact and the number of people it employed and all that. So that's why it's not that straightforward to gauge that impact, and we are having so many variables and so many controls to gauge that thing. And what we are actually contributing to literature over here, that we have this sort of studies already there, done on like Plan 9 and Plan X and single incubators, but there isn't any precise comparison available of what I'm trying to do to make a comparison of public and private sector incubators. when ITU do it, so ITU do it with the Plan X and Plan 9. When LGU do it, so they do it with their incubator. And when NICs on the state side, they do it, so they do it only for NICs. So there isn't any
Yeah.
comparison available.
No, but that's not the problem. I think the problem is आपके research question का focus. If I'm understanding, at least that's my concern, and also Dr. Fad's के focus क्या है? Why, how वाला question आप क्यों नहीं देखते? और more precise क्यों नहीं इसको करते कि what is it that is leading to the state, or these incubators, or these state owned or state directed incubators, or entrepreneurship initiatives doing well? That seems to be a more kind of interesting question, no, rather than के कर रहे हैं कि नहीं, because उसमें और भी निकल सकता है कि कुछ हो सकता है ना कर रहे हो. So you don't really know what is leading to success or failure. You know what I mean?
I
It's
got that.
too aggregate. It's too aggregate to lead to any conclusion.
Okay, so got that, and I would just like to say that even I'm not sure at this point of time that what variable exactly is contributing towards that thing. Maybe I can say, even just as a straightforward statement, that obviously state is doing good out of my own experience, but I cannot prove it statistically at this point of time. So to prove it statistically, I have to go through all this process, and then I'll be able to tell that what precise parameter or control is there that is making state-owned investments more impactful than the private sector investments. So when we will conduct this study, then we will eventually come to know that is it the revenue or the impact or the international awards or recognition thing, because that also contribute, because state is also focused towards the soft image of state and all that. These are things that contribute to GDP in an indirect manner.
Okay,
Yes,
Hamid.
yes,
Hamid. Here's the thing. I think you're just grasping at this point in time. Here is my concern. You've cited Zaim's thesis. Zaim का thesis मैंने supervise किया था. Can you hit mute, please? Okay, here's the thing with Zaim's thesis. Yes, we looked at what was happening in Plan 9, and that was that, and we made this index and all of these interesting things. But then Zaim also made a questionnaire and then went into the field to estimate the entrepreneurial abilities of folks, right? And we looked at the administrative data that Pakistan puts out in the PSLM, and we saw कि कौन से लोग हैं who are self-employed, and then we actually identified down to the district level that who is it that the state needs to be targeting to. So while it starts with the concept of the state being entrepreneurial, it funnels very neatly down to yes, let's assume that's a good thing. We quickly established that it is a good thing by doing a cursory thing of Plan 9, and Plan 9 actually was very offended by our findings because we pointed out that they were not identifying or doing what they planned out, right? So we looked at the Punjab policy, जो उनकी IT policy थी, और उस document के साथ हमने compare किया, right? So that's partially what Ali and Fahad are driving at, is कि because जो वो कह रहे हैं कि जी state intervention is a good thing, we found out in Zaim's thesis that while on paper it's a good thing, and all of these soft image points that you're making, वो on paper लिखना बहुत आसान है, but even for the state to mobilize it and to realize that policy goal is very hard, and the state was not being very, very cognizant of it. Number one. Number two, we didn't sort of harp on about that. We said, okay, this is it, but for you to realize your own policy goal, here is the sort of people you need to be looking at, right? So we found out that a 24-year-old with an undergraduate in engineering is a good bet, and then a 36-year-old with an MBA, because that person has X number of years of experience, is a good bet. So we sort of identified who the Punjab government needs to target for the Punjab government to realize its own goals. And whatever happened later with Plan 9 and us is a separate story, but that's also something you need to be prepared for, right? And Plan 9 was not very forthcoming with their data. So जो उन्होंने हमें data दिया वो there's a reason why we had to go and collect primary data, right? So all of those things are there. मेरी suggestion ये होगी कि एक तो go through Zaim's thesis to see how it twists and turns to get to that very, very clean finding which packs a punch. Number one. Number two, my concern is all of these fancy places that you're talking about, will they give you data?
Yes, ma'am. The major data is already publicly available on their websites and on their the recent reports they publish. They publish a report annually, NICs to
Yes.
be precise. So
Yes.
the data I'm looking at is already available there, and there are few things that are missing. So they will be collected through primary data. I will also be developing a questionnaire, a structured questionnaire, where I'll be asking to directly to startups, not from incubator, that what is their number of people they have employed and the number of people they have impacted, and have they
Then there's a
got any.
structural break in your data, right? Because आप इनसे COVID के बाद पूछ रहे हैं, which is an exogenous shock to their system. So I don't know. It's. I mean, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying that bear in mind that April 30th मुझे thesis vetted चाहिए है. After the second reader has read it and done all of those things, मुझे वो April 30th तक चाहिए है. So
Yes, ma'am.
so let's be very, very clear about that, because अब भी मुझे चीज़ थोड़ी सी मुश्किल लग रही है. Number one. Number two, I feel, and I might be wrong, but help me out here. I feel that you feel very strongly about this idea. मेरी recommendation आपको ये होगी कि थोड़ी सी flexibility लाएं, because आपका जो lit review है that will help you maybe carve out a different idea. So for you to देखिए, a good thesis is a done thesis. That's the motto. Okay, so let's never forget that. So in its current form, I feel there are a couple of changes that can be brought about to answer a question that is a little bit more interesting, because I can tell you haven't read Zaim's thesis, because had you read Zaim's thesis, you could have plausibly answered Dr. Fahad by saying while sir on paper it is completely right that state intervention is a good thing, but the goals have not been realized, and that's why I'm doing this, right? So those are my thoughts.
Okay, so I would just like to answer it because I'm just using the controls and statistical analysis out of Zaim's thesis, but I'm not really focused on what he got out of those variables. My focus is a little bit different. I'm not focusing on single incubator and giving them a policy document what they should do. My focus is to tell that state interventions are good for this thing, and what exact point out of these 7-8 points is actually good that state should continue. And that's also a recommendation not for state but for the private sector, because they need to work on that particular point to cope up to the level of what state is doing. So the focus is a little bit different, and I'm using those variables and those controls just to
I get it, but here is also my counter to that. You
yes.
cannot just, without reading or understanding the rationale behind the variables that one person has done, without really understanding why that person has made those indicators or is using that data, we can't just say, okay, gee, we're going to use these particular metrics. So again, मेरी गुजारिश होगी कि उसको एक दफ़ा देख लें. It might be a good fit for you. It might not be a good fit for you. You will also see where you can bring in changes there. So it's an easy read. It'll take you a couple of hours to go through it. It's not too taxing, but yes, just to be on a stronger footing methodologically, it would be helpful to read it. But yes, other than that, do we have any follow-up questions for Hamid?
No, I'm
Okay.
good.
अच्छा जी, चले, ठीक है. Hamid साहब, you'll be hearing from us next week. Can you please hit the leave button?
Sure, man. Thank you very much. Take care, all of you.
Thank you जी, अल्लाह हाफिज़.